Hey everyone, this video isn't going to be technical. I just wanted to share my thoughts on efficiency and what it means. Let's start with a thought experiment. Imagine the smartest developer you know, and let's say we could clone them 4 times, and so you have this super team of 5 genius developers. Your company sets them out on a task, which is to build a custom editor for a language that they built. This genius developer team pursues it and they get it done in just 2 weeks. It would have taken a regular developer 20 weeks. That's really impressive, right? But now let's imagine that maybe a lesser developer, instead of building this from the ground up, didn't reinvent the wheel. They go and they build a language file for an existing editor and they plop that in. There's less time to test it, less time to document it, less time to maintain it, and that lets you free up those resources for other development tasks. Maybe there was a reason why this genius developer team made a custom editor. Maybe there's a legal constraint or there's some custom functionality needed. But the point is that efficiency really encompasses everything. It's not just the obvious ones that we might think of, like typing or using all the programs available to you. These items in green might greatly outweigh what's happening with just your keyboard and mouse. Imagine not designing or prototyping your code and just diving right in. You might have to repeat all of that work that you did when you find out that the code doesn't match your requirements. In my opinion, most of efficiency developing takes place in your head, not in your computer. So in this video, we're going to talk about that part, what takes place in your head. But in some of the other parts of this course, we're going to talk about, yes, what takes place in your computer and how can we improve what we generally consider to be parts of efficiency developing. Let's analyze the cost versus benefit. You don't just snap your fingers and become efficient overnight. There is some ramp up time to it. So let's say you are learning a testing framework and it takes you 2 whole days to do this. If you don't eventually save at least 2 days of time from having written those tests, is it worthwhile to do? I would argue that yes, it is. And a big reason why is because you're building knowledge. In the future, if you want to learn another testing framework, it probably won't take you those same 2 days. But what's more is that you're not just transferring that knowledge to yourself in the future, you could also be transferring it to other people right now. Maybe you give a talk over lunch at your company to even just 6 other teammates. And of those, 3 benefited from it and they each saved a day worth of time from the knowledge that you put in. That alone outweighs the cost that you might have had. But what's more is that you can avoid what I'm calling long-term context switching here, which is, let's say you develop feature X in January, and then you develop feature Y in February, and then it isn't until March that you finally get to testing feature X. Do you think you'll remember what code you wrote back in January, or what specific bugs you could run into? Some of us probably find it very hard to remember what we coded yesterday or 3 days ago or a week ago. By avoiding that context switching, you don't have to pay a cost unnecessarily a second time. If you write this right when you do it, you're going to have it fresh in your head and you'll be able to test it then right when you do it. And finally, you don't always have this trade-off of, well, I spent 2 days doing something and now I need to save at least 2 days. It's possible that you spend 2 days doing something and you clearly save a month or 2 months off of this. Let's continue this cost versus benefit analysis by talking about diminishing returns. There was a time in your life when you didn't know about copying and pasting text. Can you imagine what it would be like now if you were a developer and you still didn't know that? Even to do something simple like sharing a URL with somebody could take upwards of 20, 30 seconds. The amount of time we've saved by just learning copying and pasting is probably minutes every day. Then, on the other hand, there are functions like changing your text editor's color theme, which if you even do, you might do once per year. So clearly we can't just learn everything when it comes to programs or shortcuts out there. How do we prioritize these? Well, I think there are 2 buckets in which these things can fall. One is it's a common operation, and 2, it's a costly operation. A common operation might be something like you're duplicating a line of code 20, 30 times per day. Costly operation might be something like you're formatting your code on a save. That'd be very hard to do by hand. But then there's this gold mine that is both buckets, where it's common and it's costly. So something like copy pasting code. You're typing out every single character and you have to do this pretty frequently. These aren't just for things that might sound like hotkey usage. It's for really any aspect of your life. So for example, if you're deciding on dinner for 30 minutes every day, that's time that could be spent doing something else. The point of this is that only you can really identify those things or somebody close to you. So I can't tell you exactly what's going to be high priority. But in a lot of this course, I'm going to tell you what was high priority for me to try to give you inspiration. On that note, here are my goals for this course. I want to get you to be mindful about what you're doing. So again, you should think about what's going to save you the most time, what's important to you, where can you find these bits of efficiency. And I want to share all the tips that I think are helpful, and a lot of this is going to come from those cheat sheets in addition to the videos. And finally, I just want to get you to improve something. If you revamp your entire workflow as a result of this, then great, but that's not really the goal here. If you just do anything really, improve your typing speed by 5%, or you start testing your code, anything that gets you to think a little bit more about, am I spending my time wisely developing? That's a win for me. To wrap up here, I think that efficiency encompasses practically everything. It's not just the micro efficiencies like using hotkeys, but it's also the macro efficiencies like, are you prototyping your code, or did you talk to your coworkers when you settled on a design? And there is a cost to that. So keep that in mind, that you'll need to figure out, does the benefit outweigh the cost? Do you have some way of validating that? And there's this saying, penny wise, pound foolish. I've sometimes spent 3 hours in the past trying to develop a script that's going to save me 1 second in very specific situations. Be careful about falling into those traps too. Try to at least pursue the things that are going to give you the most bang for your buck. And finally, everybody's different. I can't tell you what's going to be the most bang for your buck. I can only give you some ideas here. There's one last thing I wanted to talk about, and that was that I mentioned earlier about long-term context switching, where you develop something in January that you don't test until March and you might have forgotten during that time. I didn't talk about the short-term context switching, which is something like, I have this task, and now what do I type to be able to do that task? The faster you can cut through that context switching, the more efficient you'll be, because you won't need to recover any of that mental context that you have. A lot of times that's where I feel like these micro efficiencies will help. So you might think, well, why would a shortcut like go to definition help me in my code? And it's because you don't have extra time to lose your train of thought. So I hope you learned something watching this video. Thank you very much.